Welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, and this is the healthiest half hour anywhere online today. Appreciate you joining us right here on Facebook and on YouTube. Coming up today, keto, paleo, and breast cancer. Can those low-carb, high-fat diets increase your risk of being one in 8 women who will be diagnosed with it? We'll find out when we speak with Dr. Kristi Funk on the program today. But first, let's get you caught up on the latest happenings. Here are your health headlines for Thursday, October 8th. 2020. Coronavirus infection rates are on the rise in 34 states as well as Washington, D.C. over the last week. America's heartland in the midst of the biggest surges, however, with hospitals in some states filled with more than 4 times the number of patients. Nationwide, health officials report more than 50,000 new cases and 900 deaths Wednesday. But in a spot of good news, hard-hit California, the infection rate there is down 11% over the last week, according to the Washington Post. Okay, let's move on quickly today, because today's interview with Dr. Kristi Funk was originally meant to be an Exam Room podcast exclusive, but we figured this information was too good to save for just one place, and we wanted to bring it here to the Exam Room Live as well, because Dr. Funk is about to put keto and paleo diets under the microscope and examine what they could mean in terms of breast cancer. So she's going to be looking at all of the available science on low-carb, high-fat diets, going to connect the dots as best as she possibly can. And it's interesting that she's doing this when the first step in our 4-pronged approach for beating breast cancer is actually eating a plant-based diet. So what do you think Dr. Funk is going to find? Well, we're about to find out. And you're also going to hear her speak a little bit more about dairy and milk and cheese and how the hormones found in there can also wreak havoc on breast health. So sit back, relax, and learn. And I think you're really going to enjoy the heart scans that you're going to see during this presentation. To say that they're eye-opening would be a gross understatement. Continuing our Let's Beat Breast Cancer series here on the Exam Room podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee, joined again by the esteemed Dr. Kristi Funk. Dr. Funk, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, Glamour Boy. Glad to be back.
I'm so glad. I have so many guests on this show, and you are the only one that calls me Glamour Boy. God bless you.
I'm the only one who sees you as you truly are.
Indeed. All right. Oh, man. We had a fascinating first episode there. And before we get to talk today about keto and paleo, and then we're going to dive into dairy as well, why don't we go ahead and kind of look back a little bit at what it was that we were talking about last week. We were talking about red meat, processed meat, even got into chicken and fish a little bit. But I understand that you have a phenomenal study that kind of puts a bow on everything it was that we were discussing.
Indeed, I do. So this is the UK women's cohort study. And what they did was they followed 35,000 women for 8 years. And in those subsequent years, 1,850 breast cancers were diagnosed. This is extremely interesting to me because we have a comparison from meat eaters to no meat, vegan and vegetarian consumers. And this might not surprise you if you listened into last week. Those who ate meat versus those who didn't had an increase of breast cancer by 41% for consuming red meat, an increase of 39% for consuming processed meat, and an increase of 22% for consuming chicken. Again, sort of pointing to all the things we discussed last week as the culprits for creating that microenvironment, that soil that is conducive to a malignant breast cancer seed, conducive to its growth, to its proliferation, and potentially its metastatic potential. So whatever we can do in our lives and our choices, particularly with diet and nutrition, but also with lifestyle factors, to mitigate those powers that be in that soil that cancer requires for it to multiply and divide and propagate and metastasize and ultimately threaten your life, you should be doing. And a lot of us would if we only knew. So through these podcasts, through the Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign, if you pay attention, you can no longer say, I didn't know. And you'd actually be incentivized, not scared. Everything that I like to advocate for, it improves all of health in such a dramatic way that you're incentivized to continue on. For example, Al Gore, when he had his beautiful documentary talking about climate change, it was very, like, kind of created a fear in everybody. They're like, I got to recycle and I got to drive a Prius and I've got, which, believe me, is beautiful. I'm all for it. But the point is, fear-driven behavioral change is never sustainable. And what is sustainable is joy, is love, is happiness, because you definitely want more of that. Nobody wants more of fear to drive behavior. But when the behavior begets all of these qualities inside and outside and around you that you strive to achieve, it becomes easy. It becomes second nature to want to choose broccoli over burgers.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And people always ask, what is it that separates people who are able to successfully lose weight and keep it off versus those who only have it short term? And so often I will say it's about finding your why. And that goes exactly to what it is that you were talking about. Somebody who's fearful that they're not going to be able to fit into that dress at that wedding coming up. That's going to be a short-term weight loss right there.
For
But
sure.
somebody who wants to stick around because they love their family, they love life, they want to be around and experience it, they have their why. I guarantee you that person is going to keep those pounds off, if not for good, certainly way longer than the person who's going to the wedding in a few months.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, let's talk about some diets here that celebrate meat, red meat, processed meat, a lot of fat in there. Keto. I mean, it is more than a buzzword. It is just a phenomenon right now across the world. The keto diet and breast cancer, do the two really mix all that well?
You know, they don't. And the reason why these diets are so incredibly popular is that they do work in the short term to achieve weight loss goals from overweight people. And they can actually decrease insulin requirements in type 2 diabetics, again, because of the weight loss. And they also advocate for the step one of an excellent whole food plant-based diet, which is to eliminate the junk food, the processed food, those that are just the cookies, the cakes, the chips, the crackers. And so when you have a diet at a baseline that's laden in all of these processed junk foods that are high in refined sugars and processed flours, etc., and you eliminate all of that, then you're automatically like getting a huge benefit out of the change in diet without understanding that that was the benefit. Now what you're doing, eating a diet high in fat and cholesterol and low in complex carbohydrates, is actually building up the disease toward life's biggest killers. So let me explain. So if we look at your typical keto paleo Atkins South Beach plate, we do have some healthy fats and a few vegetables in here, but really we're looking at a lot of meat and cheese. And what that is filled with is saturated fat, cholesterol, and a complete lack of fiber and zero phytonutrients. By definition, phytonutrients are only found in phytos in plants. Despite the fact that man in the paleo period actually didn't eat this way, and I'm not even going to get into the fact that eating meat and dairy leads to horrific animal cruelty and water pollution and water scarcity and pesticide and antibiotic overuse, leading to the emergence of superbugs. I'm not going to talk about climate change or biodiversity loss or planet destruction, exacerbation of world hunger, catastrophic natural disasters like heat waves, floods, wildfires, hello California, melting ice caps, and irony upon irony, the end of life on this planet, despite the fact that animal agriculture is the #1 contributor to all of these stated atrocities. I'm not even going to say that any of that is a reason to avoid meat-centric, low-carb diets like keto. I'm just going to give you a 3-letter word or acronym. LAD, your left anterior descending artery, aka your own life, okay? This is the big pumper that keeps your heart your biggest pumper alive. All right, so the LAD. This study, the Lifestyle Heart Trial, was published, I'm going to highlight it here, 1990. The reason why I want to call out that year is that I went to med school in 1992. And I did not hear about this study until I read about it in 2017 when I was writing my bestseller, Breast the Owner's Manual. We talked about it last time. I delved into all of the science myself. I didn't use a ghostwriter, and I have an inherent need to be right just because it's like my moral obligation if I'm putting something published out there, but it's also my personality to want to be right. So anyway, I was doing research for the book, and when I came across Dean Ornish's work, I thought, well, what was this, published in Greenleaf magazine or something? Is that why I never heard about it? Because it was 1990 that it was published, and I went to med school in 92, and when you hear the results of this study, if you are not already familiar with it, your jaw should drop to the floor and shatter that it has been kept under wraps by who knows who, because it was published in one of the world's most prestigious medical journals, The Lancet. All right, so what is this study? Dean Ornish took a bunch of basically cardiac cripples who were like sent home to die. Like, there's no more bypass for you. We've used all the veins in your legs and you're maxed out on our meds. Maybe we can tweak around with a few more Lipitors, etc. But yeah, good luck. See ya, like at your next visit. I have no advice for you. Those people. He takes a bunch of these end-stage cardiac patients and he does a randomized controlled trial. And half of them go to doctor's visits as usual, and the other half are going to embrace a whole food plant-based diet, a vegetarian diet, and other healthy lifestyle behaviors like daily exercise and try to quit smoking and stress reduction. And before you all go, let's get picture perfect proof of what your arteries look like. So this is an angiogram, if you don't know, and it is dye put into your vein that whooshes around and then goes into the arteries and gives you an outline of the cardiac vessels. Barely getting through this stenosis. All right, so away everybody goes, and they come back 1 year later. Those that did come back from the control group all had worsening of their disease. Those that were in the experimental group, arteries wide open. All right, not every single one of them. 82% had demonstrable improvement in their arterial disease, and nobody had worsening. Say what? The number one killer of you and everyone you love and of most people on planet Earth, heart disease, was not just maybe preventable 30 years ago, but reversible. Like beep, 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 back the truck up, reversible, like get out of the wheelchair and start doing 5Ks, maybe even run a 10K for real. I mean, that's maddening to me that I went to med school and didn't hear a peep about nutrition. But when you have this rock solid picture, perfect proof of angiographic vessels going from stenotic to wide open, and I don't hear anything about it ever in my entire medical career, that's got to really give you pause to wonder about the financial powers that be, not only in the medical educational institutions, but also just in the average layperson. Like, what is getting filtered to us? Like, what are we missing out on? Because this revelatory study was not a one-off. On the other side of the country, Dean Ornish on the West Coast, Dr. Esselstyn on the East Coast. Dr. Esselstyn later published very similar, even more dramatic lifestyle evidence of angiograms wide open as well. And it really blows my mind that I didn't hear a thing about it until I just stumbled across it doing my research.
It never ceases to amaze me every time I see those slides side by side. I mean, night and day doesn't even begin to describe the difference there.
I know. So the bottom line is to all of the paleo and keto, et cetera, advocates out there, just show me your study that shows that you, with your diet, can reverse the number one killer of all people on earth, because that's heart disease. And close behind it, because of vascular disease, is stroke and dementia and Alzheimer's. So, and the saturated fat leads directly to diabetes. So I just need your angiograms. I want the proof in the pictures. And when bulletproof coffee and, bacon for breakfast can do that, I'd still be on the side of the animals. But the point is, I might change my stance on the diet and health aspects, but I need the proof first, and I'm not going to get it.
Yeah, and I think that for the majority of people, when they turn to a diet like Atkins, like keto, like paleo, it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the segment, and that is it's a short-term solution, right? So that's why people think that these are the greatest things in the world, because yeah, initially they will help you lose weight, but the trade-off there in terms of your long-term health is not a good one.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you're just trying to look sexier at your own funeral because that's all that's going to happen.
Mm,
Maybe in a thinner little body bag. I mean, I
wow.
don't think you're going to buy, but to quote Michael Greger, the goal isn't to fit into a smaller casket.
Right. Try to look slimmer at your own funeral. Goals. Goodness gracious. Okay. So we have covered that. I think that the big one here, I mean, talking about vegans here, is dairy. We've talked a ton about meat and fish, but now let's talk about dairy a little bit, because dairy is something that a lot of people think, well, this again, kind of like chicken, kind of like fish, this can't be all that bad. And even if you go through the grocery store aisles in October, you look at all of these little packs of yogurt, they've got the pink ribbon on them. And well, this has to be good for me. It's got the pink ribbon, right?
I
Well,
know.
what's up with dairy?
So let's talk about dairy and vegetarians who do have it over the meat eaters for sure. It's a healthier lifestyle, but there's room for improvement in everyone who's vegetarian, and that is to share some data and understand the facts that revolve around, again, the cellular response to consuming animal protein and animal fat, because there's protein and fat in dairy. So let's have at it. I'm going to start with a powerful study. So the Adventist Health Study 2 had 69,000 people followed for just 4 years. I love this study because it's one of the very few out there that actually pulls out the vegans from the vegetarians. So get ready for some fun. Eating was categorized as either meat, pretty evenly divided here, 33,000 plus people, versus vegetarian, 35,000 plus people. And over those just 4 years, we have almost 3,000 cancer cases that developed, 5% of them in men and 3.4, almost 4%, 3.8, almost 4% in women. All right. Versus meat eaters, the vegetarians had 24% less cancer. But can we do a little sub-analysis and get better? Well, yeah, we can. So let's break down the vegetarian group into vegans who have no meat, dairy, or eggs, pesco or fish eating vegetarians, lacto-ovo, milk and egg eating vegetarians, and the semi-vegetarians. Sometimes they'll have a little bit of meat. Interestingly, vegans were the only subgroup to show a statistically significant drop in cancer, and it was a 34% drop in breast and gynecologic cancers relative to meat eaters. That's it. So when you really do a sub-analysis, you find that while they didn't have more cancer than the meat eaters, they didn't enjoy the benefits, right, of eating with fish or plus milk or plus eggs. So let's take a closer look at dairy. What's happening here? So dairy, people sometimes don't think about the full scope of dairy, right? They think milk. Oh, I don't drink milk. Yeah, but do you have cheese like cheddar, Swiss, mozzarella, Jack, goat cheese? Do you eat cottage cheese, cream cheese, cream? Any cream in your coffee? Sour cream on your potato, ice cream, gelato, butter, yogurt. Again, when I was diving into science to prove the way I ate, a frequent breakfast of mine would be non-fat, plain Greek yogurt with a bunch of berries and some flax seeds. Like, see, I had it like mostly going on, but every meal seemed to be contaminated, so to speak, with just a wee bit of animal protein or fat. Like my lunch, a big salad, like huge salad, but on top, my sacred feta, which was my favorite cheese, and a little bit of salmon. Dinner, tons of vegetables, skinless, boneless chicken breast. Every meal just had to have that animal content, right? So I'm right there with you. It's very little, there's no judgment from me. Not even very little, there's none, because I was right there not that long ago until science changed me. So here we go, Jerry. The thing is, you'd think as someone kind of wanting to demonize dairy, I would say there's all these hormones and it spikes IGF-1 and there's saturated fat and there's pesticide residues, there's antibiotics, there's aflatoxins, and that should lead to a proliferation of hormonally sensitive breast cancer cells. But on the other side of our scale, research shows that the calcium, the vitamin D, the butyrate, lactoferrin, conjugated healthy linoleic acid seems to oftentimes have a null effect on the negative aspects of dairy, such that when you look at the research objectively, it lands all over the place. You will find some studies that show an increase in breast cancer risk, others, quite frankly, a decrease, others null effect, because of this healthy connection between some of the inherent properties of dairy versus some of the negative ones. But let's take a little deeper dive. Low-fat dairy doesn't seem to actually pose breast problems. It may pose other health problems, but I'm focused on your breast right now. The saturated fat in full-fat dairy definitely is about to raise your eyebrows. So think whole milk versus skim milk. In LACE, the Life After Cancer Epidemiology Study, there were almost 2,000 early stage breast cancers followed for 11.8, almost 12 years. And what they found is that people who had one or more daily servings of high fat dairy versus those who had less than half a serving of high fat dairy daily, again, where's my vegan group? Boom, almost a 50% increase in all-cause mortality. Just from that wee bit extra of full fat dairy. In fact, so this was 2013, but we have a study from this year, 2020, that looked at dairy, soy, and the risk of breast cancer, those confounded milks. And this was quite robust. Over 52,000 North American women were followed for almost 8 years. And in that time, 1,000 plus breast cancers developed. And if you compare the highest versus the lowest consumers of dairy milk, there was a 50% increase in breast cancer. But looking at just the median, and I like this, because when you do extremes, you get to a nice, like, wow, shocking number, but that is not necessarily the majority. Almost by definition, it isn't, right? Especially if it's a quintile, you're looking at the highest fifth versus the lowest fifth, but 3/5 of people are in the middle, and maybe that isn't as wowing as a number. This is just the median intake. Like, hey, you have 3 cups of dairy milk and I have 3 cups of soy milk. How are we doing? Oh, I have soy, 32% less breast cancer. Might want to change the milk in your coffee. All right, so I want to talk a little bit more about milk, because this is interesting. Like, what is it about the milk? And what it is where the milk's coming from. It's the mama of the milk. Unlike days of yore, and I'm talking 50 plus years ago, these are pasture-fed little cows that, the modern cows, first of all, they themselves are mostly GMO cows. They're genetically modified organisms, modified to be big, fast, and to make lots of milk all the time. In fact, they continue, by the way, people, I was going to just sing out the women, but everybody knows. When do women make milk? Human women make milk. Not that there are non-human women, by the way, but you know my point. You gotta just have had a baby. And you know what? Same is true of cows, except kind of not really, sort of, because as soon as they can carry a calf, those cows are inseminated, they're pregnant, and they're given extra hormones half the time to make milk while pregnant. And then they have the calf, which is immediately removed from them. They're still milked nonstop. And then usually 2 to 3 months later, boop, re-inseminated again. Constantly for their entire lives, they are making milk their whole lives. And the second their milk starts to dry up, decapitated. So they make milk throughout their pregnancy and then throughout their entire lives. And that is critical, because this state of pregnancy and lactation is by definition an elevated estrogenic state. That's how you make the milk, in part. You need prolactin and other things. So these estrogens, by the way, they reside primarily in fat. Hence, you ingest substantially more estrogens that belong to the cow from full-fat dairy, because the estrogen is in the fat. And that includes organic, obviously. So this possibly helps explain the mortality bump in the LACE study that we just looked at, the 49% increase in full-fat dairy. I want to show you a few facts that are pretty interesting. So here we are, 1924, 22.5 million cattle in our country. And now here it ends 2015, all right? Big fall in the existence of cows on this continent. But milk production, up over that time. Okay, fewer cows, but more milk. There's only one way that can happen. And indeed, the milk per cow, hockey sticks. That's interesting, because milk, lower fat and skim, that consumption went up and then it's kind of down in a steady state from 1992 or so to going down to 2020. And whole milk, full fat milk, the bad milk, consumption has really gone down. So what are we doing with all the milk? Throwing it down the drain, feeding it to pigs? Like, where's it going? It turns out that it takes 10 pounds of milk to make 1 pound of cheese. So if you were a dairy farmer, let's take it a step further. If you were the USDA or the government wanting to make the dairy farmers happy, what would you do? You would turn all that milk that nobody apparently wants to drink anymore, make it into cheese. 1970 to 2010 and beyond, look at our cheese consumption. So that's what I think about dairy. And here's a really tidy thing for you to think about, a tidy list. I love lists. I love checking them off. It makes me feel so like successful for the day. I'll make lists out of like nothing. Get up, check. Okay, so this is what I think about, and I think this is really helpful. I came up with this myself. I'm sure someone else has it. It's not that profound, but it's tidy. It brings you back to the point. Brings you back when you start to say like, well, I can have some 5-year age Gouda. I mean, it's quite delicious, isn't it? And a little salmon here, or one hamburger. And you know what? At the end of the day, if you're eating totally whole food plant-based, you're not wrong. A hamburger here, a salmon fillet there. I'd rather you're eating plants 80+% of the time if you want some animal protein. There are many reasons to avoid it, environmental and animal cruelty and your own health, but your health is probably not going to take that big of a hit. I just want to throw that out there, that it's not a all or none phenomenon. Every step you're making toward a better plant-based plate is a giant leap forward. But when people start to forget, when they ask me, because they didn't see my talk last week, but chicken's okay, right? I want you to think about these 5 things. Or organic, okay? So check number 1 in yellow is the answer to organic. The only check you get to avoid on this 5-check list is that you avoid, by eating organic, the contaminants and additives in the meat or the milk, okay? The pesticides and the glyphosate and all of that comes from the GMO corn and soy feed that was then fed to the cow that was killed to make your burger, or the milk that came from it, and the antibiotics and the added hormones. We'll talk about that later. I'm gonna save that one. Ooh, I believe it's for our 4th week of conversations. Just put a pin in the word Zeranol. Okay. But here are the next 4, and this is what I think will help you when you're thinking, it doesn't really make a difference, does it? Okay, if I eat organic, it's fine. No, it's not. Number 1, second check, but number 1, the cellular response to eating that animal protein and saturated fat. We talked about it. It elevates estrogen, elevates growth hormone, increases inflammation, allows for angiogenesis, the birth of new blood vessels, to come to that little tiny little speck of a cancer that would have gone away if you didn't have its blood vessel. But darn it all, that meat and dairy, just let it have its little arterial route to get all of its nutrients to grow and divide, and then exit strategy through that same vessel. I mean, there's a whole host very expensive drugs out in the westernized medical world, of which I am a huge part. But I'm not trying to bash that. I'm just saying anti-angiogenic drugs are all the rage because scientists understand that cancers need their blood vessels, but broccoli can get rid of it. I mean, for real, stay tuned. And at this talk, I think we're going to give out some awards. If you were able to be a food that stomps out new blood vessel formation, you just might get an award. Just saying that to all the vegetables out there. All right. Number 2, about despite organic, why you should do a double take at the meat on your plate. What's naturally in it? Cholesterol, saturated fat, heme iron, nitrates that become nitrosamines and nitrosamides that then become carcinogens coursing throughout your body. All right. The carcinogens from cooking. We talked about this last week. Heterocyclic amines, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, FIP. And then what's not in the meat? Most critically, fiber is not in one single animal anything ever. And you know what? I'm saying that, and some people are like, duh. I guarantee most of the listeners are like, okay, I was wondering. I was thinking maybe there was like meat, like some meat out there might have some fiber. No, fiber is exclusively a plant-based thing. So there is never any of it in your meat or your milk. And there's never any of the chemical power found in plants that we, again, talked about last time. But all of those constituents, all of the things that make your food colorful are phytochemicals that make things green or red or orange or yellow or white. And those chemicals, I thought about this one day and I was like, gosh, except for beets, which can give you quite a scare, thinking that you have colon cancer, because you do excrete, potentially, if you had enough beets a day or two ago, you're going to see some red in your excrement. But aside from that Lone Ranger, seriously, you can eat this much spinach, and is your pea ever green? Those colors, those phytochemicals, those nutrients got totally and completely absorbed into your body and used for your benefit. Every time you chewed and swallowed those colors, they never came out of your body. They stayed inside and they became your advocates, lowering estrogen, lowering growth hormone, lowering inflammation, boosting your immune system, bringing you health. So that's the checklist. And the inevitable next question from a carnivore is, all right, where do I get my protein? And the answer is, it's easy to get your protein from plants. You may not think of it at the outset because you're just so used to hearing the marketing messages around, like, you know, eating meat for protein. But it turns out that things like the hippopotamus, massive, a rhinoceros, an elephant, and the things you eat that are your protein source, like chickens and cows and goats, they're all herbivores. So yes, you too can eat plants and be big and strong like an elephant. Here are some excellent sources. So seitan, this is wheat gluten, so it's not for my celiac people out there, but that a mere third cup gives you 21 grams. You want to get about 50 grams. There's debates about how much, like 0.36 grams per pound. A little more if you're over 65, more like 65 just grams a day if you're over 65. But anyway, here we go. So seitan gives you 21 grams. Soy, just a half a cup, gives you 20 grams. Lentils, 18 grams. You're seeing, 3 meals a day. You can pretty much easily get these grams in. Beans, 1 cup of beans. Go easy on that if you're new to beans. I've got some advice there later. But nuts, nut butters, seeds, green peas, quinoa, wild rice, steel-cut oats. I didn't mean to do that. They all have substantial quantities of protein. And it really, with some conscious effort, is not hard to meet your daily requirements. The interestingly, studies show that only 3% of Americans fall short on protein requirements, and yet they're hyper focused on gotta get my protein. And on the flip side, only 3% of Americans get the minimum daily recommendation of fiber, and they don't seem to be worried about that at all. So there you have it.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me. It was recently I was doing a show with Dr. Jim Loomis, and we got to talking about how just 1 out of every 10 Americans gets the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables in their diet. And so when you're looking at just 1 out of 10, and you know that that's a great source of fiber, that F word that you like so much, you know that we're just falling short. So when you quote a statistic like just 3% of people are getting enough fiber, does not surprise me in the least, sadly.
Right. I know.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. Real quick, final thoughts here on dairy, Dr. Funk. Bottom line, brass tacks, because you did say that the data was kind of all over the place. If you are speaking to a woman who is asking you flat out, yay or nay, should I have dairy in my diet? What advice would you give her?
Flat out, no dairy.
There you
know,
go.
flat out. But yeah, there's no nutritional benefit to the dairy that you can't get from substitutes. Like people worry about, well, what about my calcium? There's tons of calcium in mixed greens, and there's calcium fortified soy milk. You don't even have to worry about it. Like if you're eating whole food plant based, you're gonna be fine with the things that dairy would otherwise give you, that was in that scale in the good category. You're gonna get it.
All right. Well, let's talk about your Cancer Kicking Summit coming up. I'm sure you'll be talking about dairy a little bit there as well.
I will. So I'm so excited. The Cancer Kicking Summit got kicked to next year in the live version because of COVID. But the summit is my dream come true. It's my little baby, because it's really my culmination of the 25 years of being a doctor and distilling down into really actionable, take it home, start right now power, the ability to control your life in all aspects. So yes, we're going to talk diet and nutrition because it's so foundational to health and mental health as well as physical. But we go way deeper than that, into the soil of everything you're thinking and choosing, everything from what's on your fork to the friendships that you're making, and the company you're keeping. It has such an influence on your best health, your best life, from all psychosocial aspects right down to the cell environment inside of you. So I'm so excited about the virtual summit, which is available in April, which will be quite a bit like, it'd be very dynamic. We're going to keep everybody very engaged, and it's on your own time. You don't have to watch it live. And then the live summit, which also will be available in virtual form, is at Terranea. This is Terranea. It's in Palos Verdes, California. It is absolutely a breathtaking retreat that will so conducive to just opening your heart and mind and soul to change and to learning. So I hope people will join me. And if you can't come to Terranea and visit in person, I'd love to see you at the virtual summit.
I love the pink superhero there that's with the logo. That woman looks awesome.
Yeah, she looks pretty badass.
She really does. She really does. So, oh man, that's fantastic. So we will put a link for you to go ahead and register in the episode notes for this podcast, or just head over to pinklotus.com/summit. Dr. Funk, we still have a couple of more shows to do this month. The next one I am really excited about, because we are going to be talking about the best fruits. We are going to be talking about the best vegetables, the best seeds, the best nuts, the best legumes, the best spices, for goodness sakes. You have a whole lot of food that we're going to be talking about.
I do. Don't miss it.
Yeah, you better not miss it. That show is coming up next week on the Exam Room podcast. So if you haven't subscribed to that one yet, head over to Apple Podcast or Spotify. Well, you see all the places that it's available there and more on the bottom of your screen. Head over there, hit that subscribe button, and leave a 5-star rating if you would be so kind. So that is our big old red carpet, black tie, big old blowout award show. You know, yeah, they've got the Grammys, they've got the Emmys. Well, I'm calling next week the veggies. So make sure that you check out the Exam Room podcast next week. go ahead and subscribe to that today so you don't miss it. Now, one more note on the keto and paleo diets that I wanted to pass along today, and that is there are many studies out there that tout their positive effects, but those same studies also acknowledge that not a whole lot is known about their potential long-term health implications. And what we do know today, and what we've known for years, is that eating a high fat diet that is filled with red meat, that is filled with processed meat and dairy, eating all of that means that you are far more likely to have heart disease and diabetes. And yes, as we heard today, even breast cancer, so many of those chronic diet related diseases. So stay tuned for more science on that. Now, throughout the month of October, we are banding together to beat breast cancer. And I encourage you to head over to letsbeatbreastcancer.org. There you can join us and take the pledge to follow the 4 steps that we have designed that can help you lower your risk of getting breast cancer. Pledge to follow those steps, get healthy with us. And just by doing that, you'll be entered to win a great prize pack with all kinds of goodies that can help get you going on your healthier journey. And I want to say a big thank you to Eat Well, Stay Well for supporting the Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign this year as well. Now, coming up here on the Exam Room Live tomorrow, Doctors Neil Barnard and Jim Loomis will be back for another Friday diet and health and nutrition free-for-all. So we're going to turn the show over to you. When you submit all of your questions, you're going to stuff that doctor's mailbag with everything that's on your mind. And Dr. Loomis, Dr. Barnard, they are going to answer as many of your questions as possible. So that is back here on Facebook and YouTube at noon Eastern. That's going to be a great way to wrap up the week. Plus, we're going to be joined by Kristi Sullivan, and she has some exciting news, something that happened with the EPA this week, something that we've been working on that is going to save the lives of hundreds of rabbits every single year. Very exciting. So we'll be joined by Kristi to talk more about that. Plus, you steer the show with your questions tomorrow, starting at noon Eastern. But that is all the time that we have here today. I want to say thank you one more time to Dr. Kristi Funk for joining us, as well as the crew behind the scenes that makes the magic happen. Thank you guys as always. And for you who was watching, my exam roomie, an eternal debt of gratitude. For everyone here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thanks again for watching. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And until then, stay safe, take a stand, and keep it plant-based.